It is an intelligent power. It will speak to any mind that will listen. It will not speak into our ideas. It is above our ideas. It speaks to us when we are willing to go beyond our ideas. Are you willing to go beyond your ideas? Very good. Speak, God. Thy servant heareth. Sometimes someone comes up to me and tells me how good it is that when they come to a class or a service at Unity, that they don't have to believe what they hear. Doesn't that make you feel good? Makes me feel good. You don't have to believe what you hear me say. Each one of us here is reaching beyond our limited concepts of things. We will never find what we're looking for in concepts, in ideas. We must get beyond our thinking into the reality of existence. And this is possible. It's possible for you to go far beyond that place that your thinking has carried you to this moment or in any moment of your life. And in these 12 weeks, these 12 classes, of which this is the second, we are going to be exploring a system of thought that will produce in all who will receive it a predetermined result. And that result is your own conscious contact with God. The only way that we can ever understand anything is to have an experience of it, and certainly that's true with spiritual things. All that we can understand about God is what we have experienced. Nothing more than that counts. That's a very powerful promise that I just gave you, that this is a system that will provide a predetermined result, your own conscious contact with God. I'm absolutely convinced that it is an exact promise, providing you are willing to fulfill the conditions for that experience, and those conditions will be exacting. They will not be intellectual. The smartest one here will probably go to the foot of the class. You see, the spiritual life is not a theory. It must be lived. We must live it. It cannot be learned in the manner that we have been moving through our limited outer educational systems. It can only be lived. One must live it. Spiritual principles only live in us the moment that we are living them. You learn about this system by living it. And tonight we'll be talking about it, or at least a part of it, but that's only a very poor substitute for living it. Each one must go out into his or her own life and change that life by practicing these principles where you live in all of your affairs. But stop and think for a moment. Isn't the thing that probably turned you off the most about religion, the religion that you knew in the past, the fact that too many people were talking about something they weren't living, talking about something they were not understanding? Many promises, but not much happening, or if it was, not happening to you. You see, this system that we're speaking of here will require some effort, as a matter of fact, a great effort, an effort requiring change on your part and on my part. And I promise you that if you will practice it, you will be changed. You will never, ever be the same again. That's a promise. One of the greatest thoughts that can dawn on the human consciousness, it is a revolutionary thought. It is a virgin thought. It is immaculately conceived. It cannot be implanted from the outside. No seed or sperm from the outside can convince you of it. And that's the thought that you and God are one, that the spiritual realm of being is your true identity. It's a fantastic thought. because we've always believed ourselves separated from the spiritual realm and somehow been trying to get into it. It's like being up to your neck in the swimming pool trying to get into the water. You're in it. You're in it. Last week we took into ourselves the first step in the direction of our spiritual experience. It was the first movement in consciousness, and this system requires a movement, a motion, an increasing momentum in the mind of your own being. And that first step was the admission of our personal powerlessness. And someone came to me after class and said, can one not admit one's own powerlessness without saying, I am powerless? Somehow it causes me to cringe to deliberately use the I am in that negative statement. And she said, I appreciate the principle, but object only to the statement. And for the benefit of those of you who have been in the metaphysical movement for a long time, you know the question that she was asking. I am is the name of God in us. I am. I am. Notice how that everything in your life that you have said I am to or I will to, which means I am, has happened. Have you noticed that? Go back and look at all of those unpleasant events that occurred, and prior to their happening, can you see the chain of thought action that took place? That which became your bad was your former good that you said, I am going to have, and you did. Then you said, I wonder how I'll get rid of it. What am I going to do now? Now that I have that which I have said I must have. But at any rate, in Exodus, the 3rd chapter, the 13th verse, when God was sending Moses back to give the message of freedom, to draw the people out of captivity, out of bondage. And remember that Egypt means the bondage of one's human self. That's what Egypt is. All of us have been in Egypt, and perhaps in some large measure we still are there. Not the Egypt of a country, but the Egypt of a consciousness. And so the Lord God was sending Moses back to deliver the people, and Moses didn't want to go because Moses, like you and I, said, why me, God? You see, Moses had been a failure. Moses had to leave Egypt because he wasn't doing so very well in Egypt. He was run out of Egypt. But something happened to him. His nature was changed. He was born again. He had an experience that lifted him up into another dimension, a 4th dimension of mind, and even from that position, he did not want to go back. He said, in effect, God, do you think that they're going to believe it when I go back and tell them that God sent me? They know me. They know who I am. Do you understand that? Suppose you went home and told your family that God said for them to sell the house or whatever. You see Moses' position? God said, tell them, I am who I am. And say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you, and this is my name forever, and this I am to be remembered throughout all generations. I am that I am. And there has been established in you and me this same I amness. Within us there is a power greater than ourselves. In us, deep within us. Now, when you and I say, I am powerless, how can we do this? How can I am say that I am powerless? Let's examine that for a moment, because it's a very, very important, critical movement of understanding at this point. And remember that no spiritual principle is negative, nor can the practicing of a spiritual principle ever be negative or produce anything except an outstanding, marvelous, and satisfactory result. The universe is based on law, or principle, or truth. These words all mean the same thing. And every problem that you and I have ever had has come from our separation in consciousness, our deviation in consciousness from the way the universe conducts its business. We've decided to conduct our business somewhat differently, and it does not work. And the first principle is the turning point of our restoration to our right minds or our true spiritual condition. And that first principle is the admission of defeat. But it is not the defeat of the inner self. Some of you are familiar with Lessons in Truth. It's a basic unity textbook. And let me read to you from page 72. Personality applies to the human part of you, the person, the external. It belongs to the region governed by the intellect. Your personality may be agreeable or disagreeable to others. When you say that you dislike anyone, you mean that you dislike his personality. That exterior is something that presents itself from the outside. It's the outer changeable man in contradistinction to the inner real man. And individuality is the term used to denote the real man. The more God comes into visibility through a person, the more individualized he becomes. Remember that God is wisdom, intelligence, love, and power. And the more pronounced the manner in which any one of these qualities, or all of them, comes forth into visibility through a person, the greater his individuality. One's individuality is that part of one that never changes its identity. It's the God of yourself, the eternal part of yourself. It's that which distinguishes one person from another. One's personality may become like that of others with whom one associates. Individuality never changes. I hope that there's some movement in your thought about these ideas. There is a self of us, an outer self, that has no power, but it has believed itself to have. And most of the time we have been coming from and thinking from and feeling and speaking from that outer self. Now, who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one that I've ever known finds this an easy thing to come by, because every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. And the intellect rebels against this concept. And why should it not rebel? Because it has set itself up as our Savior and the source of our unfolding good. And do you think it wishes to surrender when it is in charge of our being? It has the place of prominence and power in our world. But it's that very intellect with its limiting ideas that has led us down that road of life that has been nothing but a merry chase into one disaster after another, if we be honest with ourselves. Notice something about the intellect. It deals with the outer world. It's connected with the five senses, and most people, therefore, live merely from the surface of themselves, from the surface outward. They are outer-oriented and outer-identified, and this self, this identity, this false personality, is called the ego. The ego lives in the world, and it is of the world, but the Scriptures say that he that is within you is greater than he that is in the world. So, our rebirth, and you've heard this word all of your life, is merely the switching of identity from the outer self to the inner self. But this cannot take place, there is no way for it to take place, until an individual sees that the outer self is a total failure and always was. The outer man has no power, never has, never shall it have, and that outer self has no permanent identity. The universe has no place for it. It will die. Now, for this self to admit defeat is not negative. It's one of the most positive and spiritual events that can occur in life, and there is no peace, nor is there any permanent understanding until this happens as the inner experience of an individual. The surrender must occur before a person can enter into their God consciousness or the kingdom of God consciousness or have an awakening to their inner spiritual identity. And this is the first step, the admission that the outer self can't cut it. You can use any language that you want, but it is not to be found there. There are no answers there, only problems. It's that self that has been posing as us. And it says, I am wise, I am strong, I am loving. Look at me, I'm a nice guy. But one day it must admit that it was never any of these things. And in that moment of admission or of surrender, From that point on, it becomes possible to believe that a power greater than ourselves, greater than this self, can restore us to sanity. Oh, did I imply that we weren't sane? Have we been insane? Well, legally, I'm certain that we have not been. But from the standpoint of the order of the universe, relative to our spiritual identity, we have been insane. Man's greatest moment is foolishness to God. Now, what is another word for sanity? Order. Order. What is insanity but disorder in the mind? Order is sanity. Everywhere that you look in the universe, you will find a divine order established there. And that order is your real nature and mine, and we can put it on any time that we choose to put it on. But we must see where our disorder has been coming from. We have believed that disorder happened to us from the outside. And it happened because we were in a certain relationship. But no, it was our disorder that arranged that certain relationship. Did it not? Disorder breeds its own disorder. But we can now come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Does this mean that you would like to be restored to some former state or condition or experience? Would you like to go back to where you were? Not I. Would you like to go back to where I was? I would not wish that on you. Then what is it that we're going to be restored to? Our spiritual condition. The divine order of the universe. There's a power that can restore us to that if we fulfill the condition. And now we have already established the first two conditions. One is the admission that we had no order of ourselves. Of ourselves we could do no thing, but there is a power that can restore us to its order. Most people have always believed in a power greater than themselves. There are only a few atheists around, and I happen to be a former one of them. You and I have often pondered the nature of this universe, its vastness, its obvious power, and that divine order, its predictability. The exact time and location of an eclipse of the sun can be predicted 1,000 years hence. Our scientists have learned to land men on the moon within 100 yards of a predetermined spot, closer than that, and then to safely retrieve them, to bring them back in a splashdown within sighting of a carrier's deck. And yet you and I, coming from where we come from, have trouble finding a neighbor a block away. And how predictable are we? I wonder what time the 10 o'clock train will run tomorrow. Our intellectual heroes, the mathematicians, the chemists, the physicists, the astronomers suggest that these vast forces and laws are in action all around us, and the religionists have been saying that a mighty purpose and destiny underlay all of that, and that if we believed a certain way, usually a way that I could never believe, they said, if you will believe this, and I could never believe it, and if you will be good while you believe it, then one day you will experience some of the benefits of being a citizen of this universe. Not all of them, because you will always be a second-class citizen. Some future time, never now. Not now. Now is for waiting, and now is for suffering. Oh, that's suffering. But there have been appearing upon the face of this earth from time to time a different order of men and women who have talked of a spiritual universe. A universe that knew neither time nor space nor limitation, and that this spiritual universe was governed by a universal spirit or God that was personal to everyone and experienceable to everyone who would fulfill the conditions. And one of the conditions is now, not then. You see, if this spirit is above time as we know time, then it is always now to this Spirit. And we cannot reach it at some future time. We can only get to it now. But this is the opposite of what we have been told. We've always been told you can't get to it now, you've got to get to it then. And so we have conditioned ourselves into a then consciousness, and then never comes. When have you ever had an experience then? Anything you do now. And if you're not doing it now, you don't like it. Now is the time. So can you see that the greatest single factor that has prevented us from having the very experience that we have sought has been the idea that God cannot be experienced now, but must be experienced at some later time. And there is no such time. There is no such God. God is now. God says, I am that I am. I am is right now. God does not say, I am going to be. When we experience God, it will be right now. And as long as we're pointing toward the future, we will never get there. You see, we must have this experience on God's terms, not ours. And that's how we fulfill the conditions. But to get back to what the certain special men and women have been saying to us, that this Spirit's nature is love. Love beyond the scope of human imagining. And we have stood outside that love and wondered where it was. Have you not looked around and wondered where God's love was? Where is it? God, if you love me so much, why am I suffering so much? And we've been told that this Spirit is superhuman strength and power, omnipotence, unlimited power, and that this power can be directed into an individual's life when the conditions are fulfilled by that person to have such an experience. And this Spirit or power is unlimited intelligence, omniscience. It doesn't think, it knows. It is all knowledge. And that knowledge and intelligence can and will come into our experience to direct, guide, comfort, correct any condition that exists. Here's a fantastic idea for you. At this very moment, the intelligence and power that created and sustains the universe and that is actually running this fantastic universe right now will run your life right now. And there's only one reason why it cannot and will not, and that is that you do not believe it right now. That's a condition that must be supplied by the human factor. I must supply the idea that this is my power to be experienced now. And I must come to believe that it is the desire of this intelligent, responsive power to do just that for me because its nature, its name is love. Its name is love. The nature of God is love. The spiritual realm of being is your true identity, and there is no other true identity. Remember what the master teacher said, see what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. Those are not my words. He said, I can do nothing of myself, but the Father who dwells in me does His works. This outer self can do nothing, this limited self. Only the self that is within can perform. But something is required. The child must believe in the parent. The visible must believe in the visible. And it must come to believe because it does not believe. And if it thinks it believes and does not, it cannot have the experience. It deludes itself. You see, there is an old idea that has been running around the human consciousness for hundreds of years, and that idea is, I believe in God. And we do not. What we mean when we say that is that we believe that perhaps God exists somewhere, sometime. But we don't believe in God. We have not come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can do anything at all for us right now. But the ones who have come to believe this have had fantastic, dynamic, instantaneous experiences as the result of believing that. And the thing that drives us into this belief is usually the distress of our own personal experience. It does not have to be that way. I can learn by another person's distress, if I will. I can come to believe. I can't. I had to do it the other way. This is an idea. You can come to believe in God because of what happened to me. Let's put it that way. I had to experience it. Let me read to you some of the words of a man who had such an experience and who changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of men and women, some of whom are in this gathering at this moment. And this man is saying, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched all around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Does anyone have a feeling for that? Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, this was the beginning. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and a usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And while he was sitting there in his misery, contemplating his end, by chance, an old friend interrupted his thought with a telephone call. And the friend came over. In a matter-of-fact way, he told me how two men had appeared into his life, and they told him of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. And it had worked. And he had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. And then Bill's story goes on to tell that he, as a result of the words of his friend there, humbly offered himself to God, as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, and that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend, God, take them away, root and branch. He then followed through with the other principles that you and I will be practicing in these weeks. And then Bill goes on to say, these were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. And for a moment I was alarmed. I called my friend the doctor to ask him if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked, and finally he shook his head saying, something has happened to you that I don't understand. But you'd better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were. And that's the beginning of the story of Bill Wilson, who was one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Alcoholics Anonymous was originally to be called not AA, but the way into a spiritual experience or awakening. This man had such an experience at depth, and as is the case in all who have it, living from that fourth dimension, most of the time in it and out of it, always seeking to go higher and higher into this experience with the source of all life, he found that he could only keep what he gave away. He could only retain what he would share with others. Our assignment this week is a very important assignment. I would like for each one of us here to become increasingly aware of the power of God in us and all around us. Begin to think in terms of power. Become aware of power. Look the word up in the dictionary if you must. Begin to think of it in a new way. Do not let the Word frighten you. If you have fear of the Word, examine your fear of the Word. Perhaps you are afraid of power because you have seen power misused. Perhaps someone in your life at an earlier age controls you through the power of their personality, not of their individuality, because individuality will control you not at all. Perhaps one of the reasons that we've been separated from the power is that we've been afraid to put on that power and to begin to live from it. Examine your own thought and your own mind, but become increasingly aware of the power of God, the power of the universe all around you. Behold it in nature. Spend a moment here and there in the evening looking at the sky. Every star that you see is in our own galaxy. We cannot see beyond our own galaxy, and there are about 1 billion stars in our galaxy. That's 1 billion suns like our own. There's a fantastic power being generated in our own solar system, our own sun. It's 865,000 miles in diameter, and the energy that it is channeling is fantastic. It's one of the smaller suns in our galaxy. It's not one of the brighter, stronger suns at all. And there are more than 1 billion other suns in our galaxy. Some power, would you say? How many galaxies are there in the universe that we can't see with the unaided eye? At least 1 billion. Galaxies of at least 1 billion stars. Does this begin to release you from your own limitations, if only for a moment? That fantastic power is yours to utilize as your experience if you fulfill the conditions. Very important condition is to come to believe it. Do not believe that you believe it. It's all right that you have not believed it. Come to believe it. And then observe yourself in your life as you move through your life today, tomorrow, every day this week, and notice that there is practically no place in your life that you believe in the power of God. There are 10,000 powers in your life, but not God. See where you believe power is. And then practice becoming aware that this power is available to you. Come to believe that it is yours right now, in this split second of eternity. It cannot exist for you at some future time. It does not run on future time. Now, prove me now, saith the Lord of hosts. It does not say prove me next year when you're wiser or better or when you've read more books from our book room. Prove me now, saith the Lord of hosts. And practice believing that you have been actually created by this mighty power so that you can be a channel through whom it flows out into its own divine activity. The power that is greater than yourself is in yourself and is actually your higher self. And it can restore you to its order. Its order is universal. Its order is divine. Its order is very good. Now notice that I am not saying believe that the power exists. No. Become aware of its existence in as many forms, as many ways as you possibly can. But it is not just that awareness. We are coming to believe that this power can perform its mighty work in us and through us. We're not coming to believe that we're going to shape it. Do you think that you're going to control the power that's greater than yourself? And that when you get it all lined up, you're going to tell it exactly what you want it to do? That's not what we're practicing. It knows what to do. It knows how to do it. If it can create what we can see with just the unaided eye alone, then certainly it can take charge of the business of running the business of your life and mine. But I must believe it. I must believe it until I begin to believe it. And then I must believe it until I really think I believe it. And then I must believe it and believe it and believe it. And then one day I will start believing it. It has to go down, 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 down deep. Emmett Fox tells the story in one of his books about when they found the diamonds in South Africa and the yellow clay. And they had never, ever found that many diamonds anywhere on earth before, and they were amazed and overwhelmed at all the diamonds that they had found. And the deeper they dug, the more diamonds they found, and they got into the blue clay, and the quality of the diamonds, the purity of the diamonds, and the abundance of the diamonds boggled their mind. And we have to go deeper within ourselves to get down to that place where we really do believe, where believing in a power greater than ourselves becomes a continuing experience. It must be an experience, not an intellectual concept. And this is possible for every one of us, but do not think it will be easy. Oh, what I'm saying sounds so simple. Do not go away with the idea that you heard someone say something about believing in God, and you'll come back next Wednesday to class and see what else we're going to do. Practice this principle in your life. Practice it, practice it, practice it. Take it into yourself. Begin to breathe from it and feel from it and love from it. This is a new kind of thinking that produces a fantastic result. You see, the work of God is largely done in the invisible part of our being. It's done in your heart, not that physical organ that pumps blood, but in your thinking and feeling nature. God has always been with you and me. There has never been a moment. You and I are not going to find a place that God is more readily available than God has been in the past. No. But we're going to find an awareness of the availability of that power, and it becomes personal. For God is with you. And everyone that has had this experience, the personal experience of the divine intervention of this unlimited power in their lives, reports back that it is impossible to put into words what that experience is. It is so high, but they say again and again and again, with all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to seek it with all your heart. Make it first. Put it first. And everything else will be added in your life. And they report the ecstasy of this experience. The exquisite experience of love flowing through in such a way that the mind can hardly bear it. And things understood that are beyond thinking, that cannot be put into the vehicle of words to give to another mind. Do you believe it's possible for you to have such an experience? If you do not go to sleep tonight until you fall asleep trying to believe that this is your experience too. Set aside your old ideas that you are a second-class citizen of the universe and an orphan or maybe a bastard child of God, because you are not. You never were. You're God's own divine expression. God is with you, and that's the truth. And keep that thought with you in the deepest part of your being until it becomes an experience, and it will become an experience. It's impossible for you to seek it with all your heart and not have it express itself in your life. Nothing that you can possibly meet on this earth can overpower you if the power of God is working in your behalf. And until it is, everything that you meet in this life will overpower you eventually. Until we have this experience, everything that we enter into will ultimately fail or lose its flavor. The marriage may not fail in a divorce, but it will fail in the quality of its fulfillment, in its joy, in the dreams dreamed in the beginning. The job may not fail in the sense that one gets fired, but one loses their momentum and their direction and the exuberance and the feeling of accomplishment. All things fail thee if thou failest me. Do you believe that? You have within you a divine capacity, a divine power to meet every situation, joyfully, enthusiastically. You really do. And that's what we're reaching for. A whole new dimension of life. Not just to barely eke out a living and to trudge miserably down the road of some unhappy destiny. That's not what your Heavenly Father has in store for you. No. We don't have to tell God what His business is, but we have to come to believe with all our hearts that His power is ready and eager to move into its divine activity in our experience. You are more important than any star in our galaxy. You are more important than the whole galaxy, but you must believe it. Feel it. I did not say understand it. If you will practice this principle this week, practice it again and again. Before the week is over, you will know that God's power is with you, and knowing that will change your life and your destiny. It will become tangible and real as an actual living demonstration. And you will never be alone again. This system works, but we must practice it where we live. So now let's go back out there where we live and put on that mind that believes in the power of God as our own personal experience. So it is.